also a great appreciation for the great songs before 1920, in a period of time when the phonograph was just a talking piece.
He was once known as a living tribute to the classic songs of the pre-1920s, when the gramophone was a rare device in the home, and voices like Billy Murray, Henry Burr, Byron G. Harlan, and Bing Crosby dominated the music scene. In 1969, in front of 45 million people on The Tonight Show, Tiny Tim married a 17-year-old girl, a glorious moment that seemed to cement his reputation. But that was just the beginning of a strange chain of events that led to his downfall. From odd hobbies like an obsession with adult diapers to confusing performances and a controversial Christmas song, Tiny Tim gradually lost the love of the public. It culminated in a haunting incident on television that permanently removed him from the airwaves. This is a tragic story that not everyone knows about an artist who was a phenomenon of the times. Tiny Tim, born Herbert Boutros Khoury, was born on April 12, 1932, in Manhattan, New York. His father, Boutros Khoury, was a Lebanese office worker, the son of a Maronite Catholic priest. His mother, Tilly Staff, was a Polish seamstress who immigrated to the United States from Brest-Litovsk in 1914. The family lived in Washington Heights, a vibrant neighborhood with a large immigrant population. Although his parents worked hard to provide a stable life, Herbert was not attracted to ordinary things. While other children played outside, he was immersed in music. When he was 5, his father brought home a wind-up gramophone and a 78 revolutions per minute record of Henry Burr's Beautiful Ohio. That tune changed everything. Herbert listened to it over and over again, not only for the music, but also for the nostalgic feeling it brought. At the age of 6, he began teaching himself guitar. A few years later, when he heard the famous singer Arthur Godfrey play the ukulele on the radio, Herbert was immediately drawn to it and devoted himself to learning the instrument. Music was not just a hobby, but also an escape. Instead of following popular trends, he was passionate about learning classical music from the early 20th century, spending hours at the New York Public Library studying old records and discovering forgotten artists. Education was not appealing to Herbert. He attended George Washington High School but had difficulty learning and fitting in. He had little interest in math or science and was passionate about music. After failing the 10th grade several times, Herbert decided to drop out. Although his parents were worried about their son's future, he remained steadfast in his chosen path. To support himself, Herbert worked many jobs, but his heart was always in music. During this time, he came across the famous singer Rudy Vallee, a famous singer of the 1920s with a haunting falsetto singing style. Fascinated by the unique timbre, Herbert began experimenting with falsetto. At first it seemed strange, but the more he practiced, the more he realized that it was his identity. Herbert once described the moment as a spiritual experience, not just a singing style, but a way for him to express his true self. However, Herbert Khoury was not a memorable name. In search of a breakthrough, he tried many stage names such as Larry Love, Derry Dover, Julian Foxglove, and Sir Timothy Timmins, but none really stood out. In 1960, his manager suggested a new name, Tiny Tim, inspired by the character in A Christmas Carol. Despite his height of 6 feet 1 in, the name created a unique contrast, giving him a distinct image. With long hair, an uncommon thing in the 1950s, colorful costumes that looked like they came from another era, and white makeup on his face to show innocence and youth, Tiny Tim was not only a musician, but also a special character. With his unique falsetto voice, ukulele, and love of classical songs, he quickly attracted attention. In the late 1950s, Tiny Tim's journey began on the most unusual street corners of New York. He performed at the Hubert's Museum and small circuses, where street performers were looking for a chance to shine. Soon the world would know him, a unique talent, giving music a completely different color. Tiny Tim began his career in a world full of the strange and the extraordinary. In 1925, when Hubert's Museum and live flea circus was in full swing in Times Square, it was packed with acts like sword swallowers, tattooed girls, and even a flea circus where real fleas pulled tiny chariots. Tiny Tim fit right in. He performed under the name Larry Love, singing Tin Pan Alley classics in his signature falsetto. At 6 feet tall with long hair and white makeup, he stood out even among the most eccentric people. Hubert's audiences nicknamed him the Human Canary. Hubert's was both a training ground and a testing ground. Although the curious crowd did not readily accept him as a serious performer, the environment helped him hone his stage presence. He learned to attract attention and gradually accepted that being different was what made him special. By 1960, Tiny Tim felt it was time to leave to pursue bigger dreams. Greenwich Village, with its vibrant art scene, was next. But life there was not easy. He performed under various stage names such as Sir Timothy Timms and Derry Dover, accepting any stage that would let him sing, from small clubs, open mics, even the Café Wah, where a young Bob Dylan had started out. Many nights he sang just to get a meal. The turning point came in 1963 when Tiny Tim landed a steady job at the Page 3 Club, a gay bar on 7th Avenue and West 10th Street. The pay was a measly $96 a month, but he had a stage and an audience that appreciated his eccentricities. 6 nights a week he performed with passion. His colorful version of I Enjoy Being a Girl quickly became a club favorite. It was there that he perfected his unique performance style, the ability to switch between falsetto and baritone in the same song, leaving audiences spellbound. Although he was beloved in Greenwich Village, the mainstream music world didn't know what to do with him. His soaring voice and unconventional appearance made him a freak. By the early 1960s, however, the folk scene was thriving, and performances at venues such as the Fat Black Pussycat and Café Bazaar were attracting the attention of talent agents, though they were hesitant about how to market an artist like him. Tiny Tim's real breakthrough came in February 1968, when he walked onto the set of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, one of the most popular television shows of the era. The show was famous for its quick-witted humor and surprise guests. No one could have predicted what would happen when Tiny Tim turned up armed with a ukulele and a shopping bag. With his long hair framing his face, he smiled broadly as host Dick Martin looked at him in amazement. Then he sang Tiptoe Through the Tulips in his soaring falsetto. Audience reactions were mixed. Some laughed, some were stunned, but by the end of the song, everyone was hooked. Tiny Tim became an overnight sensation. In the changing times of the late 1960s, his unconventional looks and style fit perfectly with the trend toward individuality and originality. NBC executives were initially unsure whether he would appeal to a mainstream audience, but producer George Schlatter believed in his talent. Tiny Tim was soon invited back to the show several times, each appearance cementing his reputation. By the end of the year, the success of Laugh-In had opened the door to a big opportunity, a recording contract with Reprise Records, owned by Frank Sinatra. Tiny Tim had finally broken into the big leagues. Led by Richard Perry, his debut album, God Bless Tiny Tim, was released in 1968, marking a major turning point in Tiny Tim's career. Its unique blend of classic Tin Pan Alley songs, vaudeville tunes, and original compositions created a work unlike anything before it. The album's highlight, Tiptoe Through the Tulips, became a surprise hit, peaking at number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100. Richard Perry, who would later collaborate with top artists such as Barbra Streisand and Carly Simon, brought a grand style to the album with meticulous arrangements that gave Tiny Tim's music a cinematic quality. Some critics praised the creativity and effort to revive old music, while others saw it as a gimmick. However, the public was captivated, helping the album achieve impressive sales. Among the standouts, The Other Side featured surreal lyrics about melting icebergs, revealing Tiny Tim's surprising artistic depth. Another song, I Got You Babe, showcased his incredible vocal versatility as he seamlessly switched between baritone and soaring falsetto, proving that his talent was more than just an unusual performance. From late 1968, Tiny Tim was a fixture on television, from The Ed Sullivan Show to The Jackie Gleason Show to The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. With his long hair, falsetto, and ukulele, he was a one-of-a-kind phenomenon, captivating audiences. Some saw him as a strange, exciting novelty act, while others, including Bob Dylan and Andy Warhol, saw him as a true artist who brought forgotten tunes back into the spotlight. Even legends like Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra paid tribute to Tiny Tim's deep understanding of early American music. Although not without controversy, with some critics suggesting his eccentricities were a cover for a lack of talent, Tiny Tim became a cultural phenomenon. Audiences could laugh or cheer, but they couldn't stop watching him. His first appearance on The Tonight Show in April 1968 changed his life. Soon after Carson introduced God Bless Tiny Tim, the album sold over 200,000 copies. Tiptoe Through the Tulips was an instant hit. Standing 6'1" with a unique appearance and a unique performance style, Tiny Tim completely captivated audiences. He played old songs on the ukulele with a perfect combination of eccentricity and genuine musical talent. Even Johnny Carson, known for his humor and calm demeanor, couldn't hide his amusement and amazement. The response from the audience was so overwhelming that NBC kept getting requests to bring Tiny Tim back, making him one of The Tonight Show's most memorable guests. Tiny Tim had an unpredictable style, sometimes singing 1920s love songs, sometimes uttering unexpected statements that kept audiences glued to him. To some, he was a unique artist, but to others, he was an enigma. Was he serious or just playing a strange character? Whether adoring or skeptical, no one could deny that Tiny Tim was one of the most talked-about figures of his time. However, by the mid-1970s, musical tastes began to change. The public was moving towards mainstream rock and pop, while the novelty that had propelled Tiny Tim to the top began to lose its appeal. His appearances on The Tonight Show became less frequent and his fame faded, but before the spotlight faded, Tiny Tim had his moment in the sun, a television event that shocked America. On December 17, 1969, Tiny Tim married Victoria Budinger, a.k.a. Miss Vicky, on The Tonight Show. The wedding attracted an estimated 45 million viewers, nearly a quarter of the U.S. population at the time, second only to the moon landing. Carson, the host, even emphasized the authenticity of the ceremony in his monologue. People think we're joking about Tiny Tim getting married on television, but no, it's real. The studio was decorated with thousands of Dutch tulips, creating a fairy tale-like atmosphere. As the ceremony concluded, Carson toasted the couple with milk and honey, as Tiny Tim had requested, instead of the usual champagne. The event became such a phenomenon that it was rumored that crime rates dropped significantly that night, as everyone stayed home to watch the wedding on television. Tiny Tim triumphantly declared himself the hottest star in America. Unfortunately, his marriage did not last forever. After 8 years, Tiny Tim and Miss Vicky separated, despite having a child together. Although their romance ended, the wedding remains one of the most iconic moments in television history. Carson truly appreciated Tiny Tim. While some guests were treated as novelty items or jokes, Tiny Tim was always given room to express himself. He possessed an incredible knowledge of early 20th century music and could discuss classic songs and forgotten artists in detail. Carson seemed to respect this passion, often letting him share it with the audience. Tiny Tim also had a way of surprising Carson. Once he stunned the host by suddenly announcing his plans to marry Vicky on air. No matter how bizarre things got, Carson always handled it with humor and allowed Tiny Tim to be himself. When the audience laughed at his eccentricities, Carson made sure it never became outright ridicule. He kept the atmosphere lighthearted while still showing respect for his guests, making Tiny Tim's appearances all the more memorable. By the late 1970s, however, the spotlight was slowly leaving Tiny Tim. The unique performances that had made him a phenomenon began to lose their appeal as audience tastes changed. He continued to perform, but in smaller venues, such as community centers and circuses, while his big-name television appearances faded. The biggest blow came when Reprise Records dropped his contract, leaving his career in limbo. Undeterred, Tiny Tim decided to strike out on his own, founding Vicky Records in 1971, a name he and his wife had combined. However, within a year, after releasing 5 unsuccessful singles, the project folded in 1972. Soon after, Tiny Tim founded another label with a sarcastic name, Toilet Records, reflecting his feelings about his career at the time. Despite losing the support of major labels, he continued to record throughout the 1970s and 1980s, though most of his releases were released on smaller labels or overseas. As the glamour of his mainstream career faded, Tiny Tim found a venue that would welcome him. He played in community centers, school theaters, and even overseas. Several albums were recorded in Australia, but they were only produced in limited quantities and never made it to the U.S. market. Though he was no longer a sellout at major venues, Tiny Tim continued to perform. Unlike many artists, he was willing to go where few others dared, from racetracks to punk clubs to LGBTQ+ nightclubs to any venue that would take him. For many, this might have been a setback, but for Tiny Tim, it was a chance to continue doing what he loved. One of the most unusual moves of his career was joining Roy Radin's traveling cabaret show, which brought together once famous artists and exotic acts to perform across the United States. Tiny Tim even joined a circus on tour for over 36 weeks, performing in harsh conditions and for a reduced salary. But that didn't stop him from continuing to perform. Despite his Las Vegas heyday, he unexpectedly found a new following in the punk rock community. His eccentric style and refusal to conform fit perfectly with the rebellious spirit of the genre. He even collaborated with the Texas band POA, known for their experimental sound. From a mainstream phenomenon, Tiny Tim became a cult figure in the underground, and he was completely okay with it. In 1985, he caused controversy when he released the song Santa Claus Has Got the AIDS This Year. At the height of the AIDS crisis, the song was met with immediate backlash, with many calling it insensitive and offensive. Tiny Tim later clarified that the song had nothing to do with the disease, but the incident still became a controversial landmark in his career. In the spotlight, Tiny Tim is an eccentric entertainer, known for his high-pitched voice and love of classics. But behind the scenes, his private life is even more bizarre. From his extreme hygiene habits to his strange spending habits, everything about him defies convention. Tiny Tim is so obsessed with cleanliness that he showers 4 to 6 times a day and claims not to have missed a shower since December 20th, 1989. He eschews regular towels for fear of germs, opting instead for disposable paper towels, especially Job Squad or Bounty wipes. Even brushing his teeth requires a special formula, combining 3 toothpastes, Crest, McLean's, and Glimmer, which he believes helps his teeth achieve the perfect shine. In addition to his obsession with cleanliness, Tiny Tim also has a strange taste in cosmetics. He doesn't use them to beautify himself, but simply enjoys the feeling of being surrounded by beautiful things. He spends lavishly on makeup products simply because he admires the beauty of women. His manager has repeatedly complained about this extravagant spending, calling it reckless and childish. But that's not the strangest thing. Tiny Tim also has a special interest in adult diapers and can talk about it for hours with anyone who will listen. Even his eating habits are unusual. Tiny Tim hates eating in front of others, including his wife. Instead of eating with others, he prefers to sit alone and imagine himself hosting a fancy party, impersonating all the guests. He once ordered the entire hotel menu not because he was hungry, but simply to arrange the food in an artistic way, then walked away without eating a bite. In terms of his love life, Tiny Tim had 3 marriages, each with its own color. His most famous relationship was with Victoria May Budinger, a.k.a. Miss Vicky. On December 17, 1969, they were married on television on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, attracting 40.5 million viewers, making it one of the most watched events of the decade. He was 37 at the time, she was only 17, a controversial age gap. The wedding was a lavish affair with Victorian-style dresses and more than 10,000 tulips imported from Holland as a tribute to his song Tiptoe Through the Tulips *, but their marriage quickly fell apart. Miss Vicky wanted a stable life, while Tiny Tim focused on his career. They had a daughter, Tulip Victoria, but by their second wedding anniversary, they were separated. When Miss Vicky gave birth at age 19, Tiny Tim wasn't even there. The marriage ended in 1977, but Miss Vicky later said she had no regrets because it had been an enjoyable experience. Tiny Tim went on to marry twice more. In 1984, he married Jan Alvis, whom he called Miss Jan, but the marriage lasted only 6 months. Those close to him said his unpredictable nature and reluctance to settle down were partly to blame. His third marriage was to Susan Marie Gardner, known as Miss Sue. She had been a fan of Tiny Tim since she was 12 and contacted him during a concert tour. When they first met, Tiny Tim immediately asked her if she found him attractive. Despite their awkward initial conversation, they eventually married in August 1995 and lived together in Minneapolis until Tiny Tim's death. Looking back on Tiny Tim's life, it's clear that he lived by his own rules, whether it was his career, finances, or love life. His strange habits and eccentric lifestyle not only made him famous, but also made him one of the most unique figures in the entertainment industry. Tiny Tim never did things the way people expected. His love of the stage never waned, even as his health declined. On September 28, 1996, at the age of 64, he appeared at the UK Expo in Montague, Massachusetts. For decades, he had entertained audiences with his ukulele and his signature falsetto. But that night, just after finishing his first song in front of 135 people, he suddenly collapsed on stage. The audience was stunned. Medics rushed to the scene while some broke into tears, fearing the worst. Tiny Tim was taken to Franklin Medical Center in Greenfield, where doctors tried to stabilize him. He remained in the intensive care unit for 11 days before being discharged, still in critical condition. His heart was only working at 40% capacity, while his diabetes and congestive heart failure were getting worse. Doctors advised him to give up performing and even suggested heart surgery, but he refused. He didn't want to be scarred. He wanted to keep the heart that had been with him since birth. Despite his failing health, Tiny Tim couldn't stay off the stage. 2 months later, on November 30th, 1996, he attended a benefit concert for the Minneapolis Women's Club. As soon as he walked in, it was obvious he was not well. He almost fell at the entrance and struggled to climb the stairs. His wife, Susan Corey, worriedly begged him to sit down and rest, but he insisted on going on stage. By then, most of the audience had left due to the delay, but that didn't stop him. He performed a few songs, then ended with the song that became his name. While singing, he suddenly stopped. He turned to Susan and said he didn't feel well. She rushed him back to the table, but before she could get there, he collapsed. Paramedics immediately performed CPR before taking him to Hennepin County Medical Center. They worked on resuscitation for over an hour, but at 11:20 p.m. he was pronounced dead of a heart attack. Susan later shared that his final moments were peaceful. The last thing he heard was applause, the sound he had pursued all his life. The famous song associated with him has had a special journey. It was originally released in 1929, written by Al Dubin and Joe Burke, and first recorded by Nick Lucas, a singer known for his smooth, romantic style. The song was used in the Warner Brothers musical as dancers gracefully walk through a field of tulips, and Lucas's version quickly became a huge hit, selling over 3 million copies. But it wasn't until 1968 that the song took on a completely different look when Tiny Tim performed it on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In album. His unique falsetto and ukulele turned the romantic love song into something strange and unpredictable. Over time, the song took on new shades, from charming to weird, and from weird to scary. In 2010, the song appeared in Insidious Asterisk, becoming a creepy element thanks to the contrast between the cheerful melody and the haunting images. Despite its many shades, the song has maintained a place in popular culture. It has appeared repeatedly in commercials, cartoons, and countless works of art. Thanks to Tiny Tim, a tune from 1929 not only lives on, but has become a symbol of originality, surprise, and emotion. Everyone's life is a story worth telling, and what we have just discovered together is just a part of it. If you find this content meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Thank you for joining us. See you in the next video.